I want to bring in our political strategist panel. Mara Gillespie and Chuck Rocha join us now. Mara served as an advisor to former House Speaker John Boehner and Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Chuck served as a senior advisor to Bernie Sanders' 2020 presidential campaign. Mara, let me start with you. Surprised, not surprised, Nikki Haley?
I'm surprised because I don't necessarily understand why you have to go out and tell everyone who you're voting for. I don't think it's required. No one needs to know that you're choosing between the two and who you choose. So I am surprised. I don't know what the benefit is to coming out and having this announcement. I know it's not an endorsement, but is it not?
Most voters will not understand the technical difference.
I agree with you. And I think that is a disservice to her supporters who have been pretty vocal in the primaries recently. Even though she's been out of the race, they still continue to vote for her. So what message does it send to them?
And from your vantage point, Mara, is that a meaningful statistical matter that in Indiana, Maryland, other places, Nikki Haley, having suspended her campaign nearly 2 months ago, still clocks 18 to 20% in these essentially non-contested primaries? Does that mean something to you?
It does, because it shows us that, again, we knew this going into this before Donald Trump was the nominee, but that people didn't want this rematch of Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. They're still telling us that, especially Republicans who are dissatisfied with their choices and wanting to have somebody else to look to. You know, Nikki Haley, sure, if she was going to vote for Trump, that's great. You don't need to tell everyone that. You also have this option. It's called a write-in. You can do that as well. So I don't know that I don't know that this really does move the needle for the Nikki Haley voters. Maybe for some of them it does, but I still think they're going to be questioning what happened here and what's really the motivation behind it. Chuck, is she running for VP? I don't know.
Well, let me pick up on that. About a week ago, Chuck, as you know, there was one story that Nikki Haley was under consideration. And within an hour on a social media platform, former President Trump said, no, she's not. Do you think in any way, shape, or form this might change that calculation?
I don't think it changes it, and I think Nikki Haley wants to be the president in 2028, and that's why you saw her do what she did today.
Right.
I am not a lobbyist.
This is a long-term play.
This is a political move, and when you want to talk about politics, I've been doing politics for 34 years. She wants to be the president. She's young. She's dynamic. She got a lot of support. She's still getting 20%, to your point, of people voting for her, and she ain't even running on the ticket. Like now,
spending no money, doing nothing.
Absolutely, and that's a problem in states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona. I know we'll get to that, but I don't think all of those people flock to Joe Biden. I'm not stupid. But I think that if enough of them skip that part of the top of the ballot or a little bit of support to Joe Biden, it goes a long way.
So I want to ask you from your vantage point, Chuck, this week, former President Trump completely mangled a message on contraceptives and access. Someone associated with this campaign posted a video that said something about a unified Reich. Long term, which is more politically problematic for the former president?
Anything to have to do with a woman's body. You saw Democrats win on that in 2022. It's a powerful message. Any of us who spend any time around a woman in our lives know that there's one thing you don't do, and you don't mess with a woman. And that's exactly what he's doing. Sure, the right stuff falls in line with all the other things that he says that folks say is anti-American or authoritarian. But talking about a woman's freedom to do what she wants to do with her body is him just reinforcing a narrative that Democrats will use over and over to mobilize women around this country.
There's a Bloomberg story today written by Joshua Green that says focus groups are detecting and have detected for like the last month or so, swing voters alarmed about this idea about what former President Trump's actual attitudes are about a third term, or would there be another election or threat to democracy? Do you think that is still a resonant issue for Democrats? And do you believe stories that talk about swing voters and focus groups volunteering concerns about that?
I do believe that, and I do focus groups all the time. It's how much of his stuff can you use? As a political consultant, he overwhelms you. He floods the zone. It's like drinking out of a water hydrant. It's like, how do you pick a piece out of everything that's coming at you to use? And you'll watch Democrats, they will defer back to this choice issue and women issue a lot more than they'll look at the democracy, but they will use that, and they'll use that to their betterment.
Mara, your perspective on that question I just put to Chuck.
I would agree with Chuck there. I think that when it comes to women's health and women's reproductive rights, Republicans will lose time and time again unless they change their message, and they're not going to. We just saw that, yes, putting it to the states is one thing, but then being wishy-washy on whether or not you actually support women's reproductive rights, and half the population are women, and telling them they don't get medical freedom, that's not going to sit well with them. Whether they're vocal about it or not, they will be vocal at the ballot box. So they've got to consider that. And then to the other point, the democracy question. It's not like Donald Trump voters didn't know who he was going into 2016. They knew who he was. 2020, they knew who he was.
They knew he was in 2020.
Absolutely. They know who he is and who he wants to be. None of that is new. Whether it doesn't make it right what he says and it doesn't make it okay, it's grotesque and horrible. But they know who he is and he wants to aspire to be a dictator, right? He doesn't want the actual job of being president. He wants to be in power. But I think when it comes to questions about democracy and women's health is where the Nikki Haley voters, those who are undecided and unhappy with the choices, that's where you might get them.
To your point a moment ago about Trump saying, well, the states will decide. Tactically, he gives off the impression that that sort of insulates him from this larger debate. But as we saw in Alabama, and as we may soon see in Louisiana, what states do about access to either IVF in Alabama or mifepristone and misoprostol in Louisiana, morning after drugs, can become an instant national issue.
You're criminalizing women for taking control of what happens to their bodies. That's what you're doing with those decisions. You're criminalizing them for having an active role in what's best for their health, what's best for them, without having any ideas or suggestions or resources to help them. You know, we focus so much on, we don't want this. But what will you do after the fact? You're telling women in Louisiana, you're telling women that they have to have these children. Well, how are you supporting them? What are they supposed to do? It's costly to have kids. It's costly to go through every appointment to make sure you're having a healthy pregnancy. But if you're preventing them from having the care and access that they need, where does it leave them?
Chuck, real quickly, does it insulate Trump strategically by saying, oh, the states will take care of it, don't ask me too much?
I think people will see through it, and Democratic strategists like me will take what happened in Louisiana and will make it and tie it around a Republican's neck anywhere that they are running, saying, this is your party, this is what your party stands for. Folks have been doing that for a long time and will continue to.
Chuck Rocha and Mara, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.